Hello and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today we're talking about Return of the Jedi, the sixth movie, the third movie of the original trilogy. I'm here with Ashley Coffin and Paul Hoppe to dive into everything we love and some things that maybe raise some eyebrows about this great movie. All that and more after a commercial break, over which we have no control. Hello folks, this is Matthew, I'm your host. I'm very glad to be back. Thank you for your patience. As I mentioned, I got married a few weeks ago, so we did not have any episodes over the last 2 weeks while I was preparing and then enjoying a marital life. But now we are back. I'm super excited to be back. And we're going to dive into the conversation about Return of the Jedi in just a moment. But first, I just want to say a quick word. On this podcast, we've always been trying to, acknowledge that as hosts, we all have our limitations. We all only bring the perspectives that we bring. And for myself, certainly as a white man, I've always been trying to bring in new perspectives, bring in new ideas, and recognize when sometimes my own perspective is missing something. And I try to do a good job at that. Sometimes I definitely miss the boat. And recently a friend reached out to me and pointed out something that happened in our last episode that really could have been a lot better. And so I wanted to kind of quickly address that. Recently I did an episode on the whole discussion around the character of Finn, played by the actor John Boyega, in the I guess post-quels, what we're calling them, the last three movies. And we talked about how really pretty badly the character of Finn had been treated. And, we addressed the fact that a lot of that was quite clearly due to racism, and that John Boyega, the actor, had named a lot of that. And then I think we kind of shifted the focus away from that, knowing that as two white guys, maybe that was not really our lane, and tried to kind of talk about a lot of the other issues that were somewhat separate from that. And I think there's a lot of value in the conversation we had, but a friend pointed out that really on a lot of levels we missed the boat in doing that, because a lot of what John was saying in his comments was that really racism was something that was undergirding the entire conversation, and that while I think Jared and I had some thoughts that were interesting to bring out, doing that conversation without having a person of color as part of the conversation, really without having a black person in that conversation, probably really made the episode suffer and made it not a perspective that I think was as helpful as it could have been. So my apologies for that. I really want to lift up the fact that a number of great black authors and podcasters have been talking about this episode, have been talking about this issue. Definitely check those out. I think obviously I'm glad you're listening to me. I'm glad you're listening to the guests we have on this show. But there's a lot of other great voices out there, many of which don't look like me and can offer you perspectives that I can't. So thank you so much for continuing listening. Thank you very much to that friend who pointed this out. And to everyone else, I'm glad you're a listener, glad you're a fan, glad you have hopefully good things to say about this podcast. But anytime you think myself or one of our other hosts or guests misses the mark on something, or just has a perspective that you think you can offer that we're not getting, or just wants to point out something you think we screwed up on, please reach out and let us know. We're always happy to hear that kind of conversation. And frankly, for myself, I'm always happy to try and make the podcast better. So with that, thank you very much. Let's now go back to our actual conversation we're having today on Return of the Jedi. And we're joined today by Paul Hoppe, who was the original host on Superhero Ethics and has been a frequent co-host on this podcast, Star Wars Universe Podcast. Paul, how are we doing tonight?
Pretty good, yeah. We just watched Return of the Jedi, and you thankfully sort of gave us the original cut to some extent, which I really want to thank you for. I was prepared to do a lot of bemoaning, and there will be less bemoaning due to cutting to the original Ewok celebration.
To slightly misquote the great Mr. Timberlake, we're bringing Yub-Nub back. So I'm happy to help with that. Also joining us is Ashley Coffin. Ashley's been on a couple of my podcasts and has become a pretty frequent guest and co-host all over the Stranded Panda podcast network. Ashley, how are we doing tonight?
Super great. I'm happy to finally be here. I missed Revenge of the Sith because of like a hurricane or whatever happened in Philadelphia. Yes. Climate change isn't real. But it was very sad to miss that. So I'm happy to be here for this one.
Definitely. And yeah, as Paul said, we did just live watch it together. We chatted with the three of us and a couple of fans. We're going to try and do more of those. And starting at the end of October, beginning of November, we're going to try and start doing those every week for The Mandalorian when those episodes come out. So definitely keep an eye out for those. You can find information about that on the Star Wars Universe podcast feed on Facebook, and also we'll be announcing it on the Stranded Panda podcast group, also on Facebook. So with that, let's dive right in. Return of the Jedi. Going into this movie, before we rewatched it, what were kind of some of your thoughts about this movie? Like, where did it sit for you in terms of the whole Star Wars story, and how did you feel about it?
I was kind of embarrassed that I haven't seen it in so long that I kind of forgot exactly what was going to happen. Like, when it was happening, I was like, oh, this was happening. But I forgot the, really strong influence that it's had on the last two movies when I'm watching it. I'm like, they just ripped this right out of this film and put it in The Last Jedi. And then this part they put in Return of Skywalker. And I was like, wow. I'm like, I almost didn't even want to bring it up because I was like, this is super embarrassing. I didn't remember it at all. So it was a lot of fun. But I also wasn't ready for like the added scenes that I didn't know about were happening.
There are definitely some added stuff, and we'll get to that for sure. Paul, what about yourself? What was kind of your take on this movie going into it?
I mean, I had sort of a similar but opposite experience of, I haven't watched it for a long time. I don't remember the last time I watched it in its entirety, but I felt like I remembered like almost word for word the entire. I might have watched it a bunch in high school.
That's
like
certainly possible.
A bunch. But yeah, some of the added scenes, I was like, this, they stand out so much because I watched the original so many times.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are kind of like harmless, like in the beginning, in like Jabba's.
We're gonna get to the added scenes for sure, but for now, I just want to talk about like the movie itself, like what you liked about it, how you felt about it.
Yeah. I mean, just overall, I think it's my favorite Star Wars movie. I don't think it's the best, but I think it's my favorite one. It's my first movie memory, like physically being in the Ziegfeld Theater and with my parents, and like I remember the moment that like the lightsaber shot out of R2 and Luke catches it. Like it was just vivid. Like this, I was 5, I was in the theater, and I remember just exactly like being there. Mm-hmm. Like I can smell the popcorn,
Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
So like the movie brings back a lot of that kind of nostalgia, but then also I don't know, I was happy with how well I felt like it held up,
Yeah.
A lot of things I think we go back and watch, and there's a lot of cringy things, and there's some things, but like, or the effects look ridiculous, or it's just like, I don't really like this story as much as I thought I did, but like, I don't know, I kind of love the story overall, and especially like Vader's arc and and all of that, which maybe they added something that undercut the best scene in the series.
No, but they didn't do that. No.
Yes.
But yeah, Paul, I think I very much agree with you. And I'm of a similar experience. This is the first movie that I remember in the theater. Same with you. I can remember we were about like 3 rows from the back. I was in the 3rd seat over. Like I have a very visceral memory of it. And one of the first things I remember is my memory of the loudest thing I've ever heard. I'm sure this is not the actual loudest thing I've ever heard, but the first time I can remember just being assaulted by sound is just the like small drum beats, and then all of a sudden like the music crashes in at the very start of the movie when the yellow text starts rolling, and it was just like a kind of audio roller coaster that I went on, and I think I have a kind of same feeling of you, like. And I like the distinction you made, and I think we make this a lot when talking about Star Wars movies and anything we have sort of nostalgia for. I don't think it's the best, but it and New Hope are really up there for me as my favorites because it really just holds up so well, with the exception of maybe like the Rancor. The effects still look very good. Yeah. The plot really works, and it just, to me, it pays off so much of the Star Wars story, in like all the stuff that gets built up about Vader and Yoda and the Force and Luke. This to me will always feel like the thing that is like the truest Star Wars canon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To me, it's like the opposite of the Revenge of the Sith, which I think I was like an emergency substitute for Ashley on that podcast.
Yes, I think that's correct.
And, where we might not have said a lot of nice things about the movie, but that, like, the 2 movies are like basically Anakin's 2 turning points, right? Like him turning to and then away from the dark side. And this one, so it just like, I buy it, like not just like that this is something this character might do, but that this is what this character would do in that moment. It pays off, like the whole character arc that's been kind of sort of simmering below the surface for I think the whole original trilogy. Whereas in Revenge of the Sith, maybe we won't talk about that too much, but like I feel like it just does the opposite. Where in that one critical moment, it just doesn't like really pay off in the same way.
Yeah. And I think that's a perfect word. It pays it off, you know. Ashley, what about for you? I know you're a little younger and didn't come to the movies at the same time we did. What's your first memory of seeing this movie?
Yeah, this came out in 83, right?
That is correct, yeah.
Yeah, I was born in 84, so I saw it probably I would say like when I was in like elementary school. I like ran with the boys because I was in with like X-Men and stuff. So I remember seeing it, and then we had like all the toys and like lightsabers were the shit, and we were breaking each other's knuckles with bats in the playground pretending we had lightsabers.
She's from Philadelphia, everybody.
Good times.
Yeah, it's just wiffle bats.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, not that hard. But yeah, so definitely like real like 6, 7, you remember. It's just kind of always there, and you always have that same like emotional feeling when the music picks up in the beginning.
Yeah.
And I honestly feel like the music saves so many of even the bad movies. When the music comes, you're like, oh, I'm so like, yeah, I'm in it.
Yeah,
I like it. And then you remember the scores from some of the movies, and you gaslight yourself into thinking that I like that movie. And then you go back and you watch it and you're like, oh, this is terrible. But then the scene comes with like the great score and the great fighting, and you're like, yeah, I'm in it again.
Yeah.
And they trick you with it. It's pretty great.
So for you, do you think this movie doesn't hold up quite as well as Paul and I think it does?
No, I think this one's great. Having watched the newer ones so much more recently and watching this one, this story is a well thought out story. Like it has a beginning, middle, and end. Like you're what you guys are saying, like it's satisfying. You get everything that you wanted. You know, especially after watching the newer ones, like say you didn't see these ones and you come back and you're like, of course Anakin would do that because we saw this somewhat growth until, the Sith, but
right.
I don't know. I loved it.
Yeah. I think Paul, it was you who really long ago turned me on to the idea that Empire especially is really the story of Darth Vader and his slowly kind of, being at odds with the Emperor and wanting to have this connection with his son and all that. And I feel like this movie, you see that much more clearly, and it really pays it off. And knowing all that, I mean, I'm so fascinated by watching Vader. And Paul, you said during the chat something I thought was really interesting, which is we so often talk about how great a voice actor James Earl Jones was, but that the person who's literally in the suit was not James Earl Jones. It was someone else, and I think you said the name. I don't remember who it was, and I should look it up.
I think David Prowse.
What's his name?
David Prowse. I'm not sure the pronunciation, but
okay, Dave Prowse. Yeah, I think that sounds right. Even he does a great job of just with his physical movements of indicating how torn he is. Like that whole beautiful scene where Luke says, like, I think I can turn you. And Vader's not like mustache twirly, mwaha, of course you can't. You're going to help me and my boy now. He's like, I'm sorry, son, I can't. I mean, there's just so much like sadness from him and defeat. And I think you're right. The body acting plays that out just as much as the voice.
Yeah, and I mean, that's one of the reasons it bothered me so much when they added like a couple of no's that are just totally unnecessary because there's so much that can be communicated just physically, and actually, like going into this, I was like all ready to say like, oh, it would have been way cooler if like, they took off the mask and it was like James Earl Jones because like, why not? But like, James Earl Jones is amazing, right?
Yeah.
And specifically in the Star Wars movies, but also just broadly speaking. But I do think that, because of how great he is as the voice, it's easy to kind of sell short, David Prowse as like really conveying a lot. I mean, he has no face to show, right?
Right.
He can't do anything with his eyes. That's something like in terms of like the X-Men, like playing Cyclops is hard because, actors do so much acting with their eyes, like seeing like Carl Urban as like Judge Dredd in Dredd, like never take the helmet off. It's like, they're, so limited, but like here it's like it's just a guy in a suit, right? So I think the Mandalorian kind of also,
Yeah, I was gonna say Jeff Randall, another frequent co-host here who talks with me about the Mandalorian, he's made the same point about Pedro Pascal.
Yeah.
That his body acting in the Mandalorian without ever seeing his face until the very end is just fantastic.
Yes. Yeah, and so that was just something that in this, in that one scene that you were talking about where they're on the moon still and they're going up to the Death Star and Luke's like, hey, you don't have to stay with the Emperor. Like, let's be friends. And like he's saying that right, exactly.
Be
and
my
like
dad.
and he's like, I can't. You don't know the power of the dark side. I think. I don't know.
And so let's talk about Vader specifically, because I think that raises a really interesting question. At the end of the second movie, Vader's very confidently saying, like, "Come join me. We'll turn on the Emperor. We'll defeat him, and we'll restore peace through the galaxy because fascism equals peace." But
man, same plot as the other movies. I can't believe this.
I know. What? Trust me, we will get to the post-core movies and be able to slam on them lots when we do. But even putting that aside, so what changes for Vader, do you think? Because now he's not like, okay, cool, Luke, now you get it. Let's now go get Palpatine. Now he's just totally resigned. What do you think is the change there?
That's a good question. I mean, it's been a few years, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a few years between Empire and... I mean, I know it was in terms of filmmaking, but I think that's supposed to take place in the storytelling. Luke makes his own lightsaber, they have to go grab Han. And, I think he discovered that Luke was his son, that he was out there, right? And he spends a long time searching for him. He finally gets him. And then... Luke rejects him, right? So, I don't know, maybe there's some feelings there. And like, it seems like now the Emperor really knows more what's going on, so maybe he doesn't feel like, he can really kind of get it done. Maybe he doesn't feel like it's going to be successful. Or maybe the whole thing is just a plot to get done.
He certainly seems to be on a much shorter leash in this movie.
Yes.
In the last one, the Emperor's kind of like, yeah, go do it with your son, whatever you want. Whereas this one, I think the Emperor is much more like using that Force influence, having that power over him.
No, he would definitely be more aware that he was starting to, turn to the light side.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like you're saying the Emperor would be of Vader. Yeah.
Palps.
In some ways, I'm not even sure that Vader is turning to the light side yet, as much as he's just wanting to assert his own. I mean, the Sith are supposed to be all about, independence and do your own thing. And I think Vader, for this point, has been... He wants to bring his son to the dark side still, but he wants to bring his almost a kind of... He wants to free his son, and he wants his son to free him. Because then together they can, like, take on the Emperor, and then Vader is free.
Right.
Yeah, and maybe at this point it's just not... Do you think, therefore, like, Vader doesn't want Luke to do this? Because at this point, Vader is thinking he still want... Like, is he kind of disappointed, you think, that Luke shows up?
I don't know. This is a good question.
I feel like there needs to be some middle thing between Jedi and Sith that everybody's just, like, cool with. Because being a Jedi kind of sucks.
Yeah, it really does.
Like, there's really nothing really that great about it. Like, if you could... just, join the dark side and not become all gross or whatever happens to you, that'd be great. So there's got to be some, like, middle ground. And I feel like I've heard that they go into that in, like, novels.
Yeah, the TV
like,
shows
doesn't Luke eventually become that, but...
The Clone War... The novels go into the whole idea of the Grey Jedi, who are, like, halfway between the Sith and the
That seems
Jedi.
like the thing to be.
And then the... in some of the TV shows, the Clone Wars especially, they go into the idea that you can be a follower of the dark side, but not Sith. And that's what I think Vader at least is, that he's still in the dark side, but that he wants to turn on the Emperor and kind of do his own thing.
Right. Or, he could want to do the Sith thing where it's like, he kills his master and then he takes Luke as his apprentice. But I don't know, I think more, thinking about it more, I feel like in Jedi, Vader doesn't really know what he wants anymore. Like in Star Wars, he has a very clear, like, I'm working for the Emperor, I'm, running the Empire, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. Like, he's just, like, taking care of business. And then in Empire, he gets on this, like, quest to find his son and to turn him to the dark side and then overthrow the Emperor. And then in Jedi, it seems like, well, that failed, and he's kind of maybe sort of, there is conflict. I feel like that's sort of right? That's what's kind of, I mean, he's gone years without seeing his son again, and so it's like, what, where's his head at? I don't know, but it seems like there is conflict, and he doesn't really know what he wants to do or what he should do until basically the Emperor shows him, right? Like, the Emperor turns Vader back from the dark side by trying to kill his son, like torturing his son, basically.
And he just found out he has a daughter. Like, how many bombs?
Yeah, I mean, that seems really interesting because it certainly does seem like Vader is trying to needle Luke towards the dark side there. Everything he says about the sister and all that, he's trying to get Luke to give into his emotion. He's trying to get Luke to fight him. And it's such an interesting thing of like, so what does Vader actually want in that moment? And I think you're right. Vader is probably as confused as anybody. And with the Emperor right there, all that influence happening, it's just all conflict.
Yeah.
And let's talk about the Emperor for a moment, because as I think we're all kind of pointing out, if you want to get someone to turn to the dark side, how many major PR blunders does Palpatine commit along that road in that one scene with Luke?
Oh, man.
He just can't stop doing it. He's like, I'm going to tell you exactly what you got to do. Instead of being like, no, don't kill me. All your friends will be alive if you kill me. Don't do that. He's like, it's just so stupid.
It's interesting because here's the one time where I think something was better in Revenge of the Sith. Because in Revenge of the Sith, I've said before, I think one of the few things that movie gets really well is the way Palpatine tempts Anakin. Not the last scene where Anakin turns, but just the slow, like, planting of the seed that maybe the Jedi don't know everything, that maybe the dark side has a little bit of knowledge, and like slowly pulling him in. And so Anakin's turning to the dark side without ever really realizing it. And Yoda and Ben have been saying all along, that's the danger of the dark side. It's seductive. You'll start down that dark road and you won't even realize it, and then it'll dominate your destiny. And here Palpatine's going, look down at your feet. You're on the dark road. Ha ha, I'm winning. I'm winning.
Yeah, just 2 or 3 more steps.
It's such a bad way to do it.
It's funny. I never really thought about it that way, but like I feel like maybe Revenge of the Sith like works better on paper, and Return of the Jedi just works better in practice.
Yeah.
I mean, then again, also like he succeeded in the first one in Revenge of the Sith, and he failed in this, so that kind of makes some sense. Like.
Yeah,
I don't know. He's off his game. It's been a while since he's tried to turn someone.
That's true.
So he's like, oh right, I'm not supposed to show all my cards.
He's like, I haven't been on that level of the cult in a while. I'm up at the top now.
I mean, you're on top. It's kind of hard. No one's challenging you.
Exactly.
So I mean, we could try to build to this, but let's just go into it right now. What do you think happens in that final climactic lightsaber battle? Like, because I think this is something Luke. Paul, you and I have debated for 20 years or so, and I've heard so many different perspectives and from so many different people. Vader is, Vader and the Emperor are both trying to goad Luke into giving into his emotions, because if he does that, it'll lead him to the dark side. And, Palpatine says, like, strike down your father, and that will cement you as the dark side, and you'll join me. And what I see, at least, is Vader succeeds in goading Luke. Luke does give in to the dark side for just a little bit. He wins the fight, but when he cuts his father's hand off, that's what allows him to kind of pull back and pull back from the dark side. Is that how you two see it? Do you see it differently? Because I think that it's such a great scene because it's so open for interpretation.
Yeah. No, I think that's pretty spot on. Something needed to take him out of that little trance, and he was like, oh, I did it to me. I have no hand. You have no hand. Oh, I'm back. Dad.
You, me, and the wampum from Hoth, we're all connected now. Or whatever the hell that creature was called, I forget.
Close enough.
Yeah, and that guy in the bar.
And,
I think, there's a case to be made that Vader's not actually trying to kill Luke and isn't trying to turn him to the dark side, but he's kind of just like playing it out and, kind of buying time and just sort of pushing buttons. And I'm not sure I would actually make that case, but like, I think it's there. I think, Luke absolutely, embraces his anger.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like, it's anger, but it's also anger driven by love, for his sister, for his friends.
Right.
And, okay, we've been told that can like lead to the dark side, but it's like that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only way place it can lead, or that it's like you can't take a step back and completely, like, yeah, he cuts off his dad's cybernetic hand, and he's like, it's a
one for one.
Right. It's like a moment for reflection, and it kind of, I think, ties him to him again, and he does like take a step back. And I think Mark Hamill was like, wait, why doesn't Luke just turn to the dark side? That would be way more fun.
That'd be so awesome.
Which foreshadows why he would want to play like the Joker.
I was gonna say, yeah, the Mark Hamill going that direction suddenly becomes a lot clearer.
Exactly. But yeah, I think that's definitely the moment where Luke basically has to decide, right? Like, because getting angry and acting out of anger is one thing, but then that moment where it's like, okay, I can now either kill this helpless person, or I cannot do that. And He's like, nah, I'm a Jedi, like my pops here.
Yeah.
Just like my dad.
I think in some ways, Ashley, you were talking about all the problems with being a Jedi, and I feel like there's an extent to which these movies eventually get to the point of like the problem with the Jedi Code, but never fully embrace it, especially with the disagreements in the last three movies. But I like what you're saying, Paul, about that maybe part of what he's doing there is seeing that, like, on some level, Obi-Wan's wrong, that you maybe can embrace anger at least a little bit when it's anger for a just cause, without it necessarily being like, oh, you dipped your toe in that pond, you're now 100% Sith, no going back, no collect $200.
Right, like it can consume you, but it doesn't have to.
Right.
And that you might not be able to control whether it consumes you, but like you might, and that it's a risk, basically. Like he force chokes those two kind of like orc-looking dudes in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Like that. I don't know whether they die or they just like go unconscious or whatever, but like that's pretty dark side.
It's a little Sithy.
Yeah, I have long argued that Obi-Wan telling someone to go fundamentally change his life because he doesn't like him selling cigarettes is not really the most light side activity you can do. But
yeah. See, they all straddle the line, and that's why I think they need to rewrite those prophecies or whatever's in those books, because it's not updated. It's not fair.
It's very true.
It's just asking for them to turn to the dark side. Like, there wouldn't be Siths if there wasn't the Jedi. And I know that's such like a broad statement, but like, it's almost like the church a little bit.
No.
You need to let people, you can't have a wife, you can't have feelings or emotions. You are just asking to create Sith Lords. Like, it's your own fault.
Yeah, remember the three principal ideas of the Jedi. That all emotion is always bad forever and ever. All attachment is always bad forever and ever. And only the Sith speak in absolutes.
It's just, yeah.
It's
good luck with all that.
Yeah. And
enjoy your paradox.
When we get to the Last Jedi, we'll definitely talk more about the religion idea, because I think that's a very
good,
a very appropriate lens through which to see them, especially in the idea that, like, what happens in almost every religion throughout history is it starts with like a religious idea, but then becomes more about like the power of the leaders and the power of the institution and the authority instead of what the religion's supposed to be about. I think that's exactly what happens with the Jedi. What are the thoughts on that lightsaber battle and like what's happening there?
I think it's really well choreographed. All of the lightsaber battles in the original trilogy are like a little kind of boxier, maybe less fluid than in the later movies.
There's no parkour.
Right,
Which makes sense. 20 years before that was invented, so. Or popularized.
Right, yeah.
She had a pretty cool backflip off those steps.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Like, he turns his lightsaber off, he backflips off the thing up onto the other thing. Like, he uses, Vader throws his lightsaber, which people should just do way more often.
All the time.
Right? It's just so effective. Like, why wouldn't you do it?
It's so good in the video games, you might as well.
Yes.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And I really like the sidekick to knock Vader down the stairs. It's like, yeah, you don't have to like only use your lightsaber, right? Like, you could kick people too. You have feet. But then like when Luke's kind of in the darkness and Vader's taunting him and finds out finds out that he has a daughter, right? Which,
Mm-hmm.
maybe that has some impact on him too, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that adds to the sort of like, hey, maybe I'll go back to the light side for a minute here.
And he said it at the end, and he's like, make sure your sister knows.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that clearly was very meaningful for him, right? So, I don't know. It's like, I think the choreography is really good. I think the editing, the cutting back and forth between like the space battle, the scenes on Endor, and the lightsaber battle, and just, the whole bit in, the Emperor's Sanctum, I think is really well paced.
Yeah.
And I don't think they added really footage there. I'm not sure, but if they didn't, then that was definitely the correct thing to do. And the music just, it can carry a weak moment, but it can also really accentuate a strong moment. And I think, John Williams does a brilliant job of that in Return of the Jedi, especially in those scenes there.
Yeah.
And that's like the only time you have vocals, right? Or
Pretty
no,
much,
there's
yeah.
also the one with the Emperor kind of yeah.
And
What
then
they
again
sound
in
like?
the Duel of the Fates and Phantom Menace. But one thing
That
I
doesn't
noticed
count.
is that if you look at the choreography of battles, at the end of New Hope, there's only one battle, the fight to stop the Death Star.
Right.
At the end of Empire, there's two battles. There's
Yeah.
the running battle in Cloud City to get free, and the lightsaber battle. And now here we have three battles, and then now pretty much in almost every movie after this, they almost always, not always, but almost always try to have three battles. A battle on land, a battle in space, and a lightsaber battle.
Right.
And almost always the choreography and the pacing of it is never as good. Like this, I think you're right. This is absolutely the gold standard of, only switching back when you need to, really keeping the tension, making it all seem like it's playing out simultaneously.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I never thought of it in those terms, in terms of like 1, 2, and 3. And in Empire, I think they cut back and forth between the two really throughout the whole movie, right? As soon as they get off Hoth, it's like there's Luke's story and there's Han and Leia's story, and the editing and the pacing I think is really strong in both movies, and I haven't felt that as much in any of the other films. And I think that can also just really helps with the emotional connection. Like if they left the same, like towards the end when they leave like the Emperor's Sanctum, when they leave the lightsaber battle, they do it for less and less time as it goes on, I think.
Yeah.
And I think they do that because it's like you can kind of sort of tease it along, but once it reaches kind of a certain like volume, kind of like emotional volume in terms of what's going on in the scene, I think if they left it for too long, it would just really damage kind of the connection to that scene. And then also the other ones, I think would be harder to be present, like in a space battle for like 5 minutes or something, when you're like, let's get back to the lightsaber battle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's so true. I mean, I realized this time watching it that from the moment, like, you have that conversation where Luke turns out the lightsaber and Vader's looking for him and taunts him about the sister, and then Luke attacks, all the way through until the Emperor has thrown down the power generator well that's just sitting there, because why not? It never cuts away. And I keep like thinking it's about to cut and realize, no, it never does, because you're right, that's where the emotional power is. Yeah. One other thing that I noticed, to point out in the chat, is, and I don't know if they intended to do this when they made the prequels or if it's just kind of a fun coincidence, but I really love that in the prequels what they set up is that the thing that turns Anakin to the dark side is that he is so afraid he won't be able to save the people he loves. And mostly it's Padme, but it's also the idea of his children, and he's just this, it's kind of a powerful story, as you said, on paper, if not in execution, of the man who thinks he can do everything, realizing that, he might not be able to save the people he loves. And that's what turns him to the dark side. And here, what turns him back to the light is the chance to do exactly that, to save the person he loves. Or at least to save a family member, a person he can love in that regard.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I thought that was... Oh, go ahead.
Okay. It's like he didn't just save him. He kind of knows he kind of saves everybody. So hero at the end really is Vader.
Ish.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's completely the hero of the story.
Yeah.
Like, he starts off as being, like, you know, the biggest villain for the first 2 movies, right? And then in the third movie, like, how many people does he kill in the third movie?
I don't think
Did he kill anyone in Return of the Jedi? Like, nobody, right?
I don't think we see him kill anybody, no.
So basically,
killed Luke's hand.
Yeah, he cuts off a mechanical hand and then kills the Emperor and saves, like, the galaxy, basically, for, like, a couple decades until the New Order, like, or the First Order, whatever, like, blows all the core systems or something ridiculous. But, like...
Because Luke, he lost, man. Palp had him dead to rights.
Yeah, and I mean, how many people did Luke kill in the third movie in Return of the Jedi? Like, a lot of people.
He's like, headshot,
right?
headshot.
Including a lot of, like, probably, like, just, you know, Twi'lek dancers on Jabba's, you know, slave barge and all that kind of stuff. Like, there's some collateral damage.
That was probably better than having to stay there with that guy.
Right. But he was dead because Leia, you know, to give her some hero credit, just, like, choked him out. And so, like, you know, they probably would have been okay. Although, there's a lot of other horrible people there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people enabling Jabba. Because, like, really, I don't think he's, like, you know, a big crime lord due to his physical prowess, right? I mean,
It made me laugh so hard. He, like, snuck down that hallway and hid behind that curtain to, like, the room when they were trying to sneak out. All of a sudden they pull back the curtain, the whole gang's there. I'm like, how didn't you hear him coming?
I thought he was, like, there the whole time.
That's even funnier.
We'll
how
get
did
to
you
that
that
in
quiet?
a second.
Because, I mean, just listen to him breathing. But, like...
But yeah, I think you're right about him being the hero. And for me, I think, I mean, yes, this is the first movie I ever remember, but the thing I think that I took away from it more than anything is this is what introduced me to the whole idea of a redemption arc. Like... you know, that the bad person can be saved and that there can be some good in them. And I should probably blame George Lucas for sticking around in toxic relationships way longer than I should have on a couple of instances. Many of which Paul talked me through. But I do think there's some real power to that idea of that, like, no one is just purely evil, you know, and that there are, you know, and it's funny because as much as I love that, I do now think that there's a lot of stories, including Star Wars later, that wind up giving you a much cheaper redemption arc. I'm looking at you, Kylo Ren. Like, but here it does feel like it's so earned, you know, that he works for it, and that it comes, and it is it's a tragic death, you know. It's not now I get to go live with my people again. It's I'm going to give my life to stop this thing that I've been a huge part of all this time.
Yeah. Although honestly, that's a little bit one of my pet peeves in redemption arcs is the number of redemption arcs that, like, have to end in the death of the person being redeemed.
Yeah.
Which, you know, in this case is fine, I think. You know, it's like he absorbed a lot of Force lightning there. Like, and,
the Kylo Ren thing upset me, but that's another podcast.
But, like, in terms of, like, you know, I think it's, for me, the takeaway is less that there's no such thing as a truly evil person, because, like, I think our friend Palps is, like, just, like, through and through horrific. To me, it's more just because a person does awful things doesn't mean they're through and through an evil person. It doesn't mean they're not capable of, you know, you could call it redemption, but, like, of good, you know, and that it's, and kind of, like, the value of trying to see the good in people and get them to change, right? Not just to see the good in them and, like, excuse, you know, their war crimes or whatever, but trying to get people to change and not thinking, oh, this person's done this horrible thing, I'm going to completely write them off and not think that they're capable of change. They may or may not be, but they may be is the point, you know?
Yeah.
To me.
No, I agree. It's a good way to look at it because Palps would never change.
Right.
But Anakin always had a chance.
Well, and that's what makes Vader a very believable and relatable character in a way that As much as I love these stories so much, and I think they're great movies, you know, no one has ever twirled a mustache as much as Mr. Palpatine. Like, he is an awfully, terribly, terribly written villain.
But he uses the Force to twirl other people's mustaches.
Oh, there you go. There you go. All right, so there is a whole lot of a movie besides that awesome scene. So let's kind of talk about some other things. How do you guys feel about everything that happens on Tatooine? Because I have to say, that is, every time I watch it, I know we have to get Han back, and I think the first time I saw it, there were some cool moments in it. But now every time I watch it, I'm just kind of like, how much time do we have to waste till we get to the real part of the story?
Yeah, well, they sure didn't waste any time. Leia just walked right in there and unfroze him. Mm-hmm. No problem.
That's true. But yeah, do you guys like the scene? Do you kind of share some of my feelings? Do you think it's like a really vital part of the movie or one you really enjoy?
I mean, I feel like it's a very clear Act 1 that has very little to do with Acts 2 and 3. Mm-hmm. And there was a feeling I had when Luke ends up on the Death Star and is in the room with Vader and the Emperor. And the feeling was like, this is the beginning of the movie in a way, you know? Yeah. But, like, I don't think it works if you just start the story there. Like, you know, you probably don't want 2 hours of that. And I think Tatooine does a really good job. I mean, it does two things. One, it contains a whole bunch of action, which people enjoy in action movies, I'm told.
And some great choreographed scene. Like you said, the R2 firing the lightsaber.
Yeah.
Luke waits holding his arm for a little longer than seems plausible, but otherwise it's a fantastic scene.
Yeah, and exactly. But it also really, I think that whole sequence is there to basically to reestablish the main characters, right? I mean, it establishes Luke as a Jedi, like according to Yoda, not a fully formed Jedi, but it's the first time we see Luke and think that's a Jedi, you know? At the same time, like, he's wearing all black, he's, like, force choking people, like,
he's like, ta-da!
So it also kind of introduces the, like, well, you know, he's a Jedi, but he's got some of his father in him, kind of, you know? And then, you know, it also, I think, has some really good, like, R2 and 3PO moments.
It really does.
You know, and then Leia, it's like they put her in that metal bikini, but then, like, she's like a super badass, like, you know, killing Jabba with the length of chain that she's attached to, you know. So I think it kind of also sort of establishes her there as an action character, you know, as well. While Han gets to be sort of like, you know, the damsel.
It's funny. I know this is not George Lucas's intention. He's made quite a lot of money being quite good at capitalism. But the first time I read the Communist Manifesto and, like, you know, the whole, like, you know, rise up, all you have to lose are your chains. And, like, had the first image I had was, like, you know, Leia, like, using her chain to free herself.
Yeah.
Like, Marx would be proud.
Free yourself by the means of your oppression.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think you do need something that shows why Luke is no longer the guy who got defeated at the end of Empire, and you need to show him get a lot stronger. And it does have some... I think in many ways this is my favorite 3PO movie. Like, he just has so many great lines and so much of that great, you know, underhand, like, you know, it wouldn't be proper kind of stuff. It's just so good. I did also think it's interesting. Clearly they hadn't maybe established this in Jedi, and I don't know if they did this intentionally when they made the prequels, but as you pointed out, he's wearing all black. That's not a Jedi uniform. We never see a Jedi wear all black.
Right. Yeah.
It's
They're always in these kind of
browns, earth tones, yeah.
White, yeah. Light white, you know,
I
off-white.
never noticed that before.
Yeah.
I think that actually might be when I started wearing all black.
I'm fairly certain that's the case, yes.
So I remember when I was like 7, for Halloween, I just dressed as someone wearing all black. That was like my costume. Was like, and then when I was 8, I dressed as a mummy, so it was all white. So it was, you know, it's a very both sides of the Force kind of thing.
No, I distinctly remember it was only about 4 years into knowing you the first time I saw you wear color, and I did a huge double take. I was like, who is this person?
Like, who's that?
Light side or dark side only, Paul.
Yeah. All absolutes, just like the Sith, only not the Jedi.
The closet is perfectly arranged, lights to darks.
So what else? Ashley, Paul and I can have this conversation again and again as we've been doing for 25 years. What other parts of this movie that stuck out for you that you wanted to talk about?
Oh, trust me, I am enjoying listening. I'm kind of like a commentator here. I'm like, this is a lot of fun. I'm learning so much. No, I think the Leia thing's important. Like, even though they starved her and made her do that, it looks ridiculous to have a 98-pound woman just crush that giant Jabba the Hutt. But it is, empowering to finally see her take on that female hero stance. Mm-hmm. It would have been nice to have her in some clothes. I loved her swing off with Luke. You're like, oh, girl, watch that back of that dress, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, that's the outfit is positioned very perfectly to show you, to make you think constantly what's not under it, but never show you what's under it. And it's quite a feat of costuming that they do there. But you're right. I think it's a powerful scene in that regard, and we've talked ever since the first movie that Leia is not the damsel in distress. In the first movie, she takes over rescuing everyone with, because these idiot flyboys get her into this hallway and they can't get out.
She's our power princess.
Right. Yeah.
And I really like that they give her version of the "I love you, I know" moment. I felt that was a really nice closing of that. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole nobody telling each other thing. Luke's like, ask me later. She's like, yeah, I love Luke. I mean, I could have told you before that he was my brother, right after I found out.
Yeah, but what was the point of telling him after everything?
Right.
Yeah, generally, if a man who is into you asks you if you love another man and you just say yes, you might want to give some context. I mean, if you're poly, great. But if that's not what you're trying to imply, give some context.
Little bit.
Right. If he seems like he might have a little bit of a fragile ego that he, covers up with swagger, just...
Huh?
No. Oh, by the way.
I like that Vader made it very clear that ancestral thoughts also lead to the dark side. It's like, what'd he say?
So, one of the most controversial parts of this movie I know is the Ewoks. Are you all pro or anti cute little bears who rain death?
They're so cute.
Yeah, they're
murder monsters.
Yeah, I know. I'm super. I remember you were the first person who introduced me to the idea that maybe Ewoks weren't great, and I was like, "What are you talking about?"
They go woo-tee.
What are you talking about? They're the best. While we were watching it today, I was like, "Oh, I had that one and that one, the figurines." And I watched Willow last night. So.
Oh, nice! All the better.
That's my favorite.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't remember if I sort of went through a goth cynical about everything phase, or if I was just telling you that I'd read other people thinking this. But I am definitely 100% on Team Ewok, and
oh, nice.
I don't get why. I know some people that's why they don't like this movie, is they think the Ewoks take away from it. But I feel like that kind of sense of playfulness and of having fun while kicking ass in the service of fighting fascism is pretty integral to all these movies.
I think so too, and beyond that, I think they lend a realness to the struggle for the galaxy that the other movies actually lack. They show us a place that is very directly... I mean, they don't show us exactly, how they're oppressed or not oppressed by, these stormtroopers and whatever who came and, built a base on their moon where they live in this forest. But, they're gonna start cutting down trees. It's come on,
They show us civilians and collateral damage.
Exactly. And that's not a thing that we have that much of, earlier on in the Star Wars universe. So I think that's really important. You were talking about the shot where one of the... They're not AT-ATs, they're the little walkers.
The scout walkers, yeah, ATSTs.
Yeah, ATSTs, right. Where they're shooting at the trees, and it's one tree, another tree splits. And there's a weight to that. That's and some of it's the music, and some of it's the placement within. It's there's this sort of flow of they just started the attack and things are going well, and then there's this now things aren't going well, bunch of the ships are getting blown up by the Death Star, and there's this sort of pacing and this flow to how the battles are going, and they kind of all go together in tandem. But when the trees are getting blown up, it's it just makes it feel real in a like it's not just a bunch of like it doesn't feel like just a bunch of actors like pretending to shoot at each other. It feels like, you know, there's actual damage to the physical world that they're inhabiting. And I think it makes the world feel more real. It makes the stakes feel more real. And also the Ewoks are just fucking adorable. So, I don't know.
The way you're describing it just makes me think of like they're hobbits, like the Shire getting like burned.
Yeah. Exactly. And like
having to get involved.
When the one Ewok gets killed and the other one's like, it's like that. It's like, I don't know, it's like the saddest moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think not this time, but I've certainly like, you know, gotten misty-eyed at that moment. I don't think there's any other moment in the series that hits me quite that hard, you know?
Right, it's like Alderaan blows up and it's like a billion people and you're like, oh, that's horrible.
Yeah.
But like, you don't know any of those people.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right.
Actually, I really like the point that you made there about The Hobbit because, you know, The Hobbit was written in part to be a story about, you know, what Tolkien saw as like the way the factories and industrialization was destroying like the countryside. And Lucas has been very clear in the interviews that he did with Joseph Campbell. In interviews he did talking, I don't remember if he was talking with Joseph Campbell or if he was talking about Joseph Campbell saying similar things, but he talked a lot about the idea that part of the inspiration for these movies was the battle of man versus machine and of nature versus industrialization, you know, and they were happening in the late 70s when like so many people were losing their jobs, the beginnings of industrialization in the auto industry and that, or the Rust Belt and all that kind of stuff. And I think this movie is really the perfect embodiment of that because it's the, you know, the non-industrialized fighting back, you know, it's using literally just like sticks and stones and arrows, which penetrate stormtrooper armor because that armor is absolutely made of cardboard, apparently.
It's the worst armor.
You don't take care of anything on the Empire.
There's just such a great visual of like, you know, these powerful machines of death and destruction being destroyed by logs, you know? Like
These itty bitty little teddy bears. So cute.
And I think they do a really good job of mixing, you know, some of these Ewok traps are really effective. And you're like, oh, wow, they just blew up this AT-ST with like 2 logs slamming at it. And then like they try and trip one with rope and they just get dragged along. Yeah. Like, it's like not every idea is going to function, you know?
Attention to detail. I appreciate that.
I forget it's we only learn the name through like the books and stuff, but what's the name of the main Ewok who they work with?
Yeah, Wicket. He like hits himself in the head with the one who finds Leia, right?
Yeah, who hits himself. He hits himself in the head with the boa thing. Great shot.
Yeah,
isn't that Warwick Davis?
It is.
Yeah, the same guy who plays.
Which is that's why I mentioned. Yeah, and that's, you know, and speaking of hobbits, right? I mean, not him, but the people. You know, this whole group of people in Willow. Okay, I won't go too much into Willow, but like
we can go into Willow.
It has a lot of kind of like Lord of the Rings parallels, and I think George Lucas very deliberately, like when J.R.R. Tolkien created Lord of the Rings, I think he wanted to kind of create like a sort of English-ish mythology.
Oh,
right?
very much so. Yeah, he thought the English needed a mythology to combat the Ring series of the Germans.
Right, and I think when George Lucas created Star Wars, he was very deliberately trying to create like an American mythology. Yeah. Or kind of more modern sort of thing. But similar, you know, I think it was very inspired by, you know, Lord of the Rings, and then he goes and makes Willow, which is like, oh, there's a lot of parallels.
Which is interesting too, because I don't think this was Lucas's intention, but especially with like the kind of mindsets we have today, I think you can very much see the Ewoks as, you know, I mean, it literally is. It's indigenous people fighting back against more technologically advanced colonialists.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
Is, you know, the Americans are on the wrong side of that particular story, to be sure.
Yeah.
But it's a story that has a lot of relevance for us, you know?
Yes. Well, and I mean, this was just like a little while after Vietnam too, right?
Oh yeah, late 70s, early 80s.
So, you know, there you also have.
Yeah, that's I mean,
that's a really good
quite a lot of the fighting there was we had the huge technological advantages, and we didn't win, didn't matter.
I don't know who this we you're talking about.
I know. We would all like to not actually be American citizens at this moment in time, but you know, we still pay taxes and we get to vote. Everybody vote.
Vote.
Yeah, do that. I still reject your week. But
that's fair.
Continue.
Ashley, welcome to our friendship.
I respect your position, but disagree with it vehemently.
If you enjoy this banter, may I suggest to you the first 80 or so episodes of Superhero Ethics? The first 40 or so.
It was yeah.
We haven't been on.
And then some of the more recent ones. Too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just a couple other things from this movie. Like I said, I love C-3PO in this. You get so many great lines, and the whole thing about him being accidentally a god is it's just so beautifully played because it's clearly being played for humor, but it's also very believable. And the stakes that they might misunderstand and eat all these people in a feast for him is very believable.
Right.
People were finally treating him nice, after all these movies.
Oh yeah, that's true. I never
no
thought
one's
of it
ever
that
nice
way.
to him. Ever.
It's true. He's just the butt of the jokes all the time, right? He's the one bringing up the rear. It's hurry up, 3PO, you get
even in the new ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they just delete
they
him,
don't
right?
have any
And,
right.
oh my god.
Yeah.
He gets deleted multiple times in the series.
Yeah.
At the end of Revenge of the Sith, it's we'll just kill 3PO. Just reboot him and destroy his person and whatever, and he'll just be a new person.
But they just can't stamp out that anxiety. It just never goes away.
Right, exactly. Some of it's hardwired.
He's all of us.
Yeah.
That's the truth of it. I had never thought about it that way.
He's very much the point of view character in that regard. And it's funny because I commented that as he tells the story to the Ewoks that it's a very shortened version, but still he's speaking not English. He's using just hand gestures and this made up language. But I feel I know exactly what point of the story he's telling at every moment. It's just a beautiful, powerful scene.
Mm-hmm.
C-3PO crushes his Vader impression.
Yeah.
Yes. It's very strong.
I just started making the physical gestures and then remembered we're on podcast, not video. But yes, exactly.
I heard them.
I felt like I heard it.
I was sort of physically moving too.
I also commented, and during our chat, I commented, and this might be a little bit of a too soon joke, but I think that there was some truth to this. When you watch, especially how Han treats 3PO, and just has no tolerance for him, and is trying to tell him what to do, but being such an asshole about it, the fact that his kid is so screwed up is not totally surprising.
Not one bit.
Yeah, you could see him not being the best dad. You could buy it.
If you have no patience for a droid like that, you're not really going to do well with a toddler, I don't think.
Right. At the same time, he very could have easily said to 3PO, when someone asks if you're a god, you say yes.
Yeah, so, that would have been a great
line.
I wonder, actually, I think Ghostbusters comes out a year or two after this, right?
Yeah, I think it was 85.
That makes sense, yeah, okay.
84. It was 84 is the next year.
Okay,
yeah.
But yeah, definitely not, or else that would have been a really fun callback in a weird way.
No, but it is... Oh, right. You mean if... Yeah.
I think that probably would have gotten Lucas... Well, he got sued for a lot of things, but probably one more lawsuit would have happened from that.
Right. Or not. I don't know. I think having a line that's basically the same as a line in another movie, I'm not sure how much you can sue someone over that.
Yeah, that's true.
But...
They've done it constantly with their own movies, apparently. God.
It's funny. Every time Han says, someone says in this, I've got a bad feeling about this, I both enjoy it, but I have this sense of dread because I know that it's now going to become I think it is the single line said more often in Star Wars properties than any other line.
I'd buy that.
I think it is said in every single movie. Someone says, I've got a bad feeling about this.
It's that so. No.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
let's take a minute or two and discuss some of the additions that we may or may not have loved. First of all, is there any addition that you did like in the new version that Lucas toyed with?
I enjoyed how everything was kind of cleaned up before I try to think about an addition that I liked, because I was having a hard time knowing what was different besides the fact the CGI in some parts was too much, but when it wasn't too much, it really worked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it felt like it stuck out in some spots where it's because the original just wasn't CGI, right? It's just all practical effects.
The sand monster looked like shit.
Right, yeah. It's just whoa, what's going on there? Maybe some of the space battles looked a little better or something. Some of the explosions, I don't know. Yeah. A lot of stuff blowing up. Some of it not in a vacuum, which is cool, given that's possible, but...
Yeah, it does remind me this all happens before, Battlestar Galactica. One of the things I liked so much about it is it's Babylon 5 showed, ships moving in space the way they would in space. And, like, the long arcs just don't happen. I think the one added scene that I do like, although I think it could have been 30 seconds shorter, is the music in Jabba's palace scene.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think it's fun. It's interesting to me that particular form of blues is, still prevalent, in different galaxies. But, like, it's a fun scene. It shows a little more of the universe. It shows a little more of, like, the kind of attitude at Jabba's palace in a way I like. Even if I don't think the Twilight Dancer had that well thought out a plan for her escape in that moment, but
right. And the whole, like, how many of their own people do they kill? Like 3 in like in the Tatooine. That's actually, because that's one of my. We were gonna do a thing on tropes. Maybe we will at some point, but that's one of my least favorite tropes. Is the like villain killing their own minions or people or whatever in order to show like how badass they are.
Right.
Yeah, they really do it a lot.
It's like they did that. They did. I'm trying to remember who else. Oh yeah, they dumped the orc guy into the pit. Yeah, the
rhino pig.
Yeah, into the pit with Luke, and then it just gets eaten. They're like, whatever.
Yeah.
And I think there was and they're disintegrating the old protocol droid. And,
even though that's not what disintegration looks like, as the Mandalorian has shown. Like, disintegration does not mean, like, anyway, that's my own little.
Well, that's what it looks like then.
Yeah.
For sure. No, but yeah, it's an interesting trope there that I think that does get used a lot in Jabba's palace. But yeah, now, and also just one quick thought. I will say there's one other sad moment, and I love that they throw this in. We've seen the Rancor be so evil and badass. And then there's that poor guy who cares for the Rancor, and he's just so sad that it dies.
Yeah, I'd like to just challenge that a little bit. I completely agree with everything you said at the end, but like, have we seen the Rancor be evil or just hungry?
Okay, yeah, no, not evil, scary.
Be starving.
Yes, scary for sure. Like, I mean, how it could still be hungry after eating the orc rhino guy, whatever, is impressive. But like, we don't know how they've been treating them.
Yeah.
I mean, the one guy who was really sad after he died seems like, okay, well, clearly they care for the Rancor.
Yeah.
But like, how do they actually treat them? I mean, some people love some people and like don't really treat them well, and so we don't really know the whole Rancor's whole story. That's all I'm saying. And it's sad when they die, because they were just kept in captivity and forced to like eat Twi'leks and
No, I think you make a good point. You kind of actually make the point that I would be making on the ethics without even thinking about it. Because I fell into the same trope. Like, when a living creature is presented as huge and monstrous and wants to eat you, that is seen as evil, instead of just like, no, it's just you do to it what it does to you, what you do to like a cow or a chicken, if you're not a vegetarian or vegan, like some people on this call. See, I'm not going to use the we there, Paul.
Okay, I appreciate that. No, yeah, you used the you.
Yeah,
but
you have a higher ability to morally judge the Rancor than I do, for sure.
Right, fair, yeah.
I will also say there's a novel in which they introduce the idea that there's a major Sith temple on the planet that the Rancor is the home planet, and that the Sith ride the Rancors like as horses.
Oh wow,
which is kind of wonderfully badass. But
wow,
yeah, seems difficult.
Yeah. I feel even worse for the Rancor now.
Yeah. Like, Sith keep them as pets; they can be cuddly. Maybe don't smell that good, but who knows.
What's her face did that in Rise of Skywalker with that other monster thing that she like force healed.
Oh yeah.
So maybe if Luke would have just been like, force something, it might have helped.
Yeah, like, you don't want to eat me. You are already full.
What
that would have been way cooler.
What they needed here was Force Ghost Obi-Wan to pop up, because as Riki Hayashi, who's the co-host on most of the Clone Wars shows, along with his wife Sarah, has pointed out, in the Clone Wars TV shows, as well as in the prequel movies, they pretty much established that Obi-Wan is the Steve Irwin of the Star Wars universe. Like, he is like, just any planet has some huge native animal, some huge native animal, he will befriend it and wind up riding it. Like, no matter where it is, he always does it.
Yeah, that would have been
that bird lizard in that one in Attack of the Clones
with a weird like sonic cry.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm now making noises from animals. I think it's probably time to wrap up.
It was like,
but yeah, any of the additions that you guys wanted to bash on for being truly bad?
I mean, the no is just the worst.
I was like...
And for those who don't remember or haven't seen this recently, what we're talking about is in that classic scene where Vader just turns on the Emperor and throws him down the well. In the original, he's silent, does it silently, and it's so powerful. Now he's watching Luke tortured, and he goes, no, and it's just... So anyway, I wanted to tell the story, but yeah, Paul, go ahead.
It's the worst. It's worse than the one in Revenge of the Sith, because at least in Revenge of the Sith, like, it wasn't that good a movie anyway. So
do you think they did that because of Revenge of the Sith, or did they put that in?
I think it was
What's
first,
the timeline?
Right? Yeah, I mean, so they did the re-releases. When were they? They were before, right? Weren't they in the like mid to late 90s?
Yeah, so
like 97.
The re-releases, I think. Well, I remember this all because the Phantom Menace came out when I graduated college, which was May of 1999. So yeah, I think the re-releases came out in the mid to late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Like 97, 98, 96, 97, 98, something like that. And yeah, so I think I don't even remember this from the re-release. I wonder if I did see the Return of the Jedi re-release, because I remember the end, which you spared us today, which is like, that's like sort of like if the whole series had shown as much of the galaxy as like the Clone Wars show did, then that type of ending could have made some sense, right? Where they show a bunch of different places. But it's like, you didn't show us anywhere. You showed us Endor, and you showed us like Tatooine and Hoth. Like, nobody's celebrating on Hoth, and like, you know, so that's like really obvious and like a bigger change. But it's just like that one scene where they have Vader looking left and looking right. He looks at the Emperor, he looks at Luke, he looks at the Emperor, and he does this several times there. And like, you can see like the Force lightning is like showing, like a skeleton or something is like showing through the mask. And then he picks up the Emperor and he walks over and then he just dumps him down the tube. And that scene is so masterfully done. And it was so perfect the first time it was made. It's just, why would you just go back to something that you did right the first time and just like take a dump on it? Like, that's what it feels like. It just feels like, it's like, why are you stepping on your moment, you know?
I feel like that is perfectly said. I have nothing to add.
All right, I'll stop
You
there.
nailed it.
Yeah.
Like, it's atrocious.
Yeah, it really is. And yeah, as Paul's alluding to, the other big change that I think we all hate, certainly Paul and I, actually, don't know if you're a fan, but you know, the original has this, again, talk about like the kind of nature over machine, you know, just this, the celebration of the defeat of this galactic empire is this small little, like, you know, gathering around a fire as people are dancing and playing drums of, you know, the heads of, you know, the helmets of Imperial soldiers. Though I think 10-year-old me thought the heads were still in there.
Of course you did.
And it's this great little song, Yub-Nub, and then they take it out, and it's that and the no, I think, to me, are just the two biggest changes that just make it takes away. It's not even just that it's bad and annoying, but it takes away from the power of the original.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the no like interferes with the power of the original, and the taking out Yub-Nub like removes some of it. Yeah, I think, you know.
And it's fan service to, you know, we now all know what Coruscant is, but the word Coruscant is never spoken in the original movies, you know? And
right.
Like you said, seeing the scene on it makes it's just callback to the prequel stuff that doesn't belong there.
Right, exactly.
I will also say, on a similar note, the changing of the Force Ghost in the final scene really bothers me, because in the original, it's the what you see is Yoda and Obi-Wan, and Anakin, and the Anakin they show is the guy who was in the suit at the very end. And in the new version, they show Hayden Christensen, who looks much younger. And it's not that I don't like it because I don't like Hayden Christensen, the actor, although that's very true, because I still don't like sand. Just have to make a reference. But it's because, like, what you're then showing is Anakin before he's changed. Like, the whole point is that, as you know, Yoda and Obi-Wan are both the old versions of them, And the Anakin that we're seeing is supposed to be the Anakin who has changed, who's gone through this thing. And so for me to show us Anakin who became Darth Vader, like it just totally misses the point. And it's just fan service for not even for no good reason, but that
it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
it makes no sense.
It's like, if you're gonna do that, then like put in Ewan McGregor, like
and a little young Yoda.
Yes.
Or even try to show
and Baby Yoda. You know what? If they put in Ewan McGregor and Baby Yoda, you might sell me on it. Because Baby Yoda is the other most adorable thing in the universe. So I don't know.
So true.
Maybe we got something there.
Okay. So what that tells us is by the last, they can't do this too early, but by like the last season of Mandalorian, Baby Yoda, maybe like toddler Yoda by then, has to meet an Ewok.
Oh, cuteness overload. I don't think I could handle it.
Yeah.
It would be a sign the show has jumped the shark and just gone straight into fan service, but I wouldn't care. It would be such a fun moment.
Not at all.
All right. Let's kind of wrap up with so where does this movie fall for you? Paul, I think you said it's one of your absolute favorites. Ashley, what about for you? Where does this movie fall in terms of all the other movies and where you rank it?
It's hard because I like so many things in so many different movies that I usually don't see them as like individual movies, if that makes any sense, which it probably doesn't. Because I like action sequences so much. So if you do a good action sequence in your shitty movie, it puts it up for me a little bit. I think I like it right after Return of the Jedi. Is the one we just watched. What was the one before it?
Empire Strikes Back.
Empire.
Yeah, it's definitely Empire Strikes Back. Still my favorite one because I love when movies end on like a really good cliffhanger, and I just loved everything about that one.
Yeah, that's fair.
But after watching this again, like this goes right after it.
Yeah.
Yeah, these two, like Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, have always been like, and Justice for All and Master of Puppets for me, where like.
Yes.
It's like two great creations that are part of like a larger body of work that it's really difficult for me to say which one. Like, I might like Return of the Jedi more. I do think Empire Strikes Back is like a more kind of perfectly conceived, executed movie to some extent. But like, they're both part of this very coherent arc of the three original movies. So I totally feel what you're saying, Ashley, that like they are part of something. So like, sort of seeing them separately, it's like, well, which act did you like the best? It's like, I don't know, I like the movie. You know? I mean, okay, the third act, but like
exactly.
And then Rogue One, I think for me also is like, I just think it's great and is a very different movie. That's maybe the most well executed out of the whole series, but like, it's probably not my favorite. Whereas this one might be.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I agree with that. To me, Empire and Rogue One are just the two best, like from a subjective, like movie making perspective.
Yes.
I think the best written, the best put together, the best acting. And it's funny. I used to say that I think that of the three, I think I liked me personally. In terms of what hits me the hardest, I like Empire's. I like least. I mean, I love all three of them. They're all part of the same coherent story, like you said. And I at one point, I think. It's hard for me because Star Wars itself has so much nostalgia value for me, like the original A New Hope. But the first couple times I watched it with younger people who were seeing it for the first time, like people who just grown up not really caring about them, or like some of my younger cousins or people like that, they always said it was so slow. And I was always so defensive about that. I was like, no, you damn kids, you think all movies should be fast. This is how movies should be. But I watch it again, I still love it, and it really does drag in some points. This movie doesn't. Like, this movie is much faster paced, I think, than A New Hope. Yeah. And it's funny too, because you think about it, there's really only three like scenes. I mean, there's Tatooine, which has all the stuff happening on it. There's and then there's some stuff on the Death Star at the same time. And then there's like a short scene on Dagobah. And then there's getting ready for the Death Star attack. And then there's all the parts of the Death Star attack. Like, it's three distinct acts that all happen pretty quickly. Yeah. So it's to some extent, every time we watch a Star Wars movie, that's my favorite at the moment. And that's kind of, unless they're the prequels.
Right. That's a big compliment, I think, to them.
Yeah.
you know, that you like watch it and remember like how much you appreciate each one when you're watching it.
Yeah.
I think one thing about this movie and being part 3 of a trilogy, that it does so well that a lot of that like sequels or like ends of trilogies, like I'm looking at you, Return of the King, really fall down on is it ends once.
Yes, that's so true.
Like, how many endings does Return of the King have? And they even removed one from the book, you know?
How
They're
many
like,
times
oh,
do we see hobbits jumping on the bed?
Right. You know, it's like, it just keeps ending and ending and ending. And it's like, here, it's like, yeah, there's the scene at the end where they're like celebrating, but it's like, that's all music. There's like a few lines, right? There's barely any lines. Yeah. And, you know, that's like, okay, that's the like denouement or whatever, but like, there's one climax and that's it. And then, and, you know, and that's the climax. And then, okay, they won. There's no, you know, villain comes back from the dead, you know, and like, you have to wait 3 more movies for that.
It's funny. I had the so what I did was I stopped the viewing we were doing and said, sorry guys, right as we got to the final ending, said, sorry, there's technical problems, but don't worry, you can watch the rest of the movie here, and then sent them to the YouTube video. That's the actual Yub-Nub scene.
That was brilliant.
And I had that idea ready, and it surprised me how fast it came. Because exactly what you're saying. Like I was thinking there's going to be like 2 or 3 big things that are endings after the.
Right.
But no, all there is the little scene between, you know, Han and Leia, where, you know, she's like, no, I love him, but he's my brother. We're, you know, kiss, kiss, everything's good. And then Luke lights the fire, and then scene, you know, and it's really nice that you're right. It doesn't drag out to 8 different endings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. Any other last thoughts or points or just things that you wanted to comment on before we close out?
I had a really good time, guys. This was super fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Ashley, thank you so much for being a part of this. Ashley, what other podcasts have you been on recently if listeners want to check you out?
We did Pandavision. We finished up The Boys recently, and I was on a couple episodes of Lovecraft Country on Pandavision.
Definitely. Yeah.
That's mostly where I live.
Yeah, all that's on Pandavision, which is another part of the Stranded Panda Podcast Network. Paul, what about for you? Where can people find what you're doing these days?
You could just like Google Zen Madman, and I don't know, I'm on Twitch as that, and I'll probably have some YouTube channels soon, but I do various things, often centered around like learning stuff, like chess, poker, languages, all sorts of fun things.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of good stuff. It's definitely worthwhile checking out. Well, and I do
podcasts with Matthew.
Yeah, and I'll just give my own quick plug. There's a great podcast called Imaginary Worlds, where it's much more a produced podcast where they take different interviews and sound clips and put it all together to tell a narrative about a particular issue. Recently I did one on the kind of the ethics of vigilantism and policing and things like that. And I got to be a guest on that. So it's a lot of fun. Big shout out to the people who run Imaginary Worlds podcast. And if you want to hear me talk about Daredevil, I get to make my favorite point about Daredevil and death and metal pipes that you've probably heard me say before. As well as talk about some other interesting stuff. It's a really interesting podcast and definitely worth checking out. So on behalf of myself, Paul, Ashley, thank you so much. Please continue supporting this podcast. Tell more people about it. Get us more listeners. Help us grow this network of great people talking and sharing ideas. Let us know what you think. You can find us on Facebook, on Twitter. All those links are... you can find them by going to strandedpanda.com and click on the Star Wars: The Universe podcast link. So thank you all so much. Have a great day.